Cowboy found an iPhone buried in 1880. What happened next changed everything. In the dust-blown frontier of 1880 Arizona, a lonely cowboy named Luke Carver uncovers something no man of his time should ever have found. A strange black glass buried beneath the dirt. At first it seems like nothing, until it flickers with light. The wind that day carried the kind of dust that clung to everything, clothes, horses, even a man's soul. The year was 1880, and the Arizona sun beat down like it wanted to burn the earth clean. Luke Carver rode slow along the canyon ridge, his horse's hooves crunching the dry earth. He was 34, lean, scarred, and tired of men's noise. For months he'd been working the old Grant ranch, patching fences, herding cattle, and sleeping under a sky so wide it felt like God himself might be watching. He wasn't born for ranching. Before this, he'd been a Union scout, then a drifter. Men like him never stayed anywhere too long. But something about this stretch of land, the emptiness, the silence, had a way of holding him still. That morning, Luke was fixing a fence line along the dry arroyo when his shovel hit metal. A dull clang. Not the ring of an old horseshoe or a bullet casing. This was different. The sound had weight. He knelt, brushed aside the dust and saw it, a small black rectangle, smooth and cold to the touch. It didn't look like anything from his world. No buttons, no screws, no engravings, just a dark glass that caught the sunlight like water. Luke turned it over in his hand, frowning. "What the hell are you?" he muttered. He thought it might be some kind of signal mirror, maybe dropped by a survey team. But the glass was unbroken, strange for something buried under years of dust. He slipped it into his saddlebag and went back to work. But he couldn't stop thinking about it. That night, after the sky turned black and the coyotes started calling, he took it out again by the fire. The flames flickered across the glass, and for a second, just a second, he thought he saw a faint glow inside, a line of light that faded as soon as he blinked. He dropped it, startled. The thing hit the dirt with a soft thud. Luke stared at it for a long time, his jaw tight. It wasn't alive, it wasn't magic, but it wasn't normal either. He picked it back up, placed it carefully in his coat pocket and whispered, "Tomorrow I'm taking this to town." Morning broke red over the desert, spilling sunlight across the dry plains like blood from an old wound. Luke Carver saddled his horse Dusty and started the 12-mile ride toward Dry Creek, a small town that had more whiskey than water and more secrets than people. The object sat heavy in his coat pocket. He hadn't told anyone about it, not even the ranch hands. Luke didn't trust men who talked too much. Out here, silence was safer. As he rode, he kept replaying the way it glowed in the firelight. It couldn't have been a trick of his eyes. Not after the way it hummed faintly in his hand. Like there was something alive inside, waiting. By noon, the roofs of Dry Creek shimmered ahead. A saloon, a general store, a sheriff's office, and a church that looked half abandoned. Luke tied up his horse outside Harris's General and Telegraph, the only place in town with any modern sense. Inside, old Mr. Harris looked up from his ledger. "Well, I'll be damned. Luke Carver, I thought you'd quit riding into town." "Only come for supplies," Luke said. "Auntie, maybe you can take a look at something." He placed the black rectangle on the counter. Harris squinted, then picked it up gingerly. "What in the devil?" "Ain't seen glass this fine before." "It was buried out near the arroyo," Luke said. "You ever seen something like that?" The old man turned it over, tapping it gently. "No maker's mark. No engraving. Ain't no compass, ain't no mirror. Too light for a tool. Looks like something from one of them Eastern labs." Luke frowned. "You mean city folks made this?" "Maybe. Or maybe it ain't from now at all," Harris muttered, handing it back carefully. "You should talk to Sheriff Dunn. He's got a mind for odd things." Luke didn't want to. The sheriff had a reputation, too curious for his own good. But something in Luke's gut told him this thing wasn't meant to stay buried. So he crossed the street to the sheriff's office, boots echoing on the boards. Inside, Sheriff Dunn was polishing his badge, a cigarette burning low between his fingers. "Carver," Dunn said without looking up. "What brings you in?" Luke placed the object on the desk. "Found that on my land." The sheriff leaned forward. "Looks like something a banker would own." "Or something no man should have found," Luke said quietly. Dunn pressed a thumb on the glass, and for a split second, the screen lit up. Just a flicker, a faint apple-shaped glow, then gone. The sheriff's eyes widened. What in God's name was that? Luke's stomach turned cold. You saw it too. Dunn leaned back, staring at the device like it might bite him. I don't know what this is, but I know men have been shot over less strange things. You keep this quiet, Carver. Don't show it to nobody else. Luke nodded. Wasn't planning to. He tucked the iPhone back in his pocket and stepped into the sunlight. But he could feel eyes watching him, from windows, from behind doors. Word traveled fast in small towns. And before the day was done, 3 men would already be asking questions about the cowboy who found something buried that wasn't supposed to exist. Luke Carver left town before sundown, the air cooling fast as he rode out toward the open plains. But even as the wind whipped through his coat, he could feel it, the prickling at the back of his neck that meant someone was behind him. He didn't look back right away. Out here, turning too soon could get a man killed. By the time he reached the edge of the canyon, he finally risked a glance over his shoulder. 3 riders, distant but moving with purpose. They weren't out for a joyride. They were trailing him. Luke had seen that kind of riding before back in the war. Slow, steady, deliberate. Men on a mission. He pulled off the trail, guided Dusty through a rocky pass and took cover behind a cluster of mesquite trees. He waited there, the sky bleeding orange behind the hills. The riders came into view a few minutes later. One heavy man with a shotgun slung over his back, another tall and lean with a scar down his cheek, and a third wearing a bowler hat too fancy for a man this far west. They passed slow, scanning the horizon. Luke's hand rested on his Colt. He didn't want trouble, but he knew it had already found him. After they passed, he rode in the opposite direction, cutting through a dry creek bed toward the abandoned mining shacks near Coyote Ridge. He needed to think, and more than that, he needed to understand what he was holding. That night, he camped near the mine. The wind howled through the broken timbers, the stars bright above. Luke pulled out the object again, turning it over in his hands. That strange glass, smooth, perfect, reflecting firelight like it remembered the sun. He wiped the dust off and again, just faintly. The apple-shaped glow pulsed once, then faded. Luke whispered under his breath, "You ain't gold and you ain't a weapon. So what are you?" He set it beside him on a blanket, watching the flames dance across its surface. Something about it felt wrong, not evil, just misplaced. Like it belonged to another life, another world. But before he could think too long, Dusty neighed sharply. Luke stood fast, gun drawn. He moved toward the horse quietly, boots crunching sand. From the darkness, a voice called out, rough, southern, and mean. "Evening, cowboy. You got something that don't belong to you." Luke froze. The 3 riders had found him. The desert night exploded with motion. Luke dove for cover behind a wagon wheel as a shotgun blast tore through the air. Sparks from the fire scattered into the wind. "Don't make this hard, Carver," shouted the man with the bowler hat. "We just want the thing you found. Hand it over and maybe you'll see sunrise." Luke's pulse thudded in his chest. He checked his revolver. 4 bullets left. He waited for the wind to rise, then fired twice toward the sound. One shot hit the dirt near their feet, the other clipped the side of a barrel. The men ducked. Luke used the chance to grab the object, wrapped it in his bandana, and slipped it into his boot. If they killed him, they wouldn't find it easy. For 10 minutes it was a standoff, the kind where silence felt heavier than bullets. Then one of the men started laughing. "You think we're after gold, cowboy? You got no idea what that thing's worth." Luke shouted back, "Worth don't mean much if you're dead." By dawn, the men were gone. Either they'd decided to cut their losses or regroup elsewhere. Luke packed fast, saddled Dusty, and headed north toward the river. He'd survived gunmen, the war, and worse, but this was different. He didn't even understand what he was running from. He needed someone who might. 2 days' ride north in a small rail town called Prescott Bend lived a man Luke once saved from a lynch mob, a professor named Elias Monroe. The old man had come west after some scandal back east, spending his years collecting strange artifacts and studying the kind of things others ignored. When Luke showed up at his cabin, Monroe nearly dropped his pipe. "Well, I'll be damned, Luke Carver. You look like you've wrestled a bear and lost." "Been a rough week," Luke muttered, tossing the bandana-wrapped object onto the table. "Found this near the arroyo. Thought you might know what it is." Monroe unwrapped it carefully, eyes widening. "Good Lord, the craftsmanship. This isn't from any factory I know." Look at these edges. No seams, no hinges. It glows sometimes, Luke said. Monroe looked up sharply. Glows. Just faint, Luke said. Like there's light trapped inside. The professor leaned closer. I've seen something like this before. In a story, not in life. The government once funded a project back east, a study of time distortion. Trying to capture light, store images, but it failed. Luke frowned. You saying this thing's from the government? Monroe sighed. I don't know, Luke, but it's dangerous. And if those men found you, they won't stop. Luke rubbed his jaw. I didn't dig it up to start trouble. Sometimes, Monroe said quietly, trouble don't care what a man wants. By the time Luke left Prescott Bend, rain had started to fall and rare and cold. He was halfway back to the ranch when he spotted Sheriff Dunn waiting on the trail. Been looking for you, Carver? Dunn said, his horse steaming in the rain. Word is, some men are dead out near the canyon. Folks say you were seen with them last. Luke's grip tightened on his reins. They came after me first. I don't doubt that, Dunn said. But whatever you found, you best get rid of it. This thing's stirring up the kind of people that don't write their names in ledgers. I can't just bury it again, Luke said. Not after what it's caused. Dunn's eyes narrowed. Then you better be ready to pay the price for keeping it. They stared at each other in the rain until Luke finally nodded. I'll handle it my way. He rode off, leaving Dunn in the mud. The sheriff watched him go, muttering, You damn fool, Cowboy. You don't even know what you're holding. The rain didn't last long. By morning, the land steamed under a rising sun, the mud drying fast. Luke rode hard back toward the ranch, but when he crested the final ridge, his gut turned cold. Smoke was rising from the direction of his cabin. He spurred Dusty forward. The closer he got, the worse it looked. The barn had been burned, the fences torn down. The door to his cabin hung off one hinge. Inside, everything was overturned. His bed slashed open, drawers dumped, food scattered across the floor. Whoever came had been looking for the object. Luke crouched, scanning for tracks. There were several sets of boot prints, heavy, deep. He followed them out back toward the water trough, where he found something half buried in the mud. The sheriff's badge. He picked it up slowly. Dunn, he muttered. That meant Dunn had come looking for him. Or maybe tried to stop the men who did this, and paid the price. Either way, Luke knew one thing for certain now. There was no running from this. Whatever he'd found, it had drawn blood. He saddled up, checked his gun, and rode west. The tracks led toward the mesa, the same route the gunman had taken that night in the desert. Luke rode until the sun dipped low and the sky turned red as rust. Then he saw the campfire. 3 men sat around it laughing. One of them had Dunn's hat. Luke dismounted quietly, circled wide, and waited for the wind to pick up. When it did, he stepped out of the shadows, his revolver steady in his hand. Where's the sheriff? He asked. The man in the bowler hat turned, smirking. Dead, like you're about to be. Luke fired once. The man fell back before his hand even reached his gun. The other 2 scrambled for cover, returning fire, bullets whipping past Luke's head. He moved low and fast, firing again. The second man dropped near the fire, clutching his side. The third ran, but Luke didn't chase him. When it was over, he stood there in the smoke, chest heaving. He looked down at the bodies, then at the strange object glowing faintly inside his coat pocket. He didn't know what it meant anymore, only that it had changed everything it touched. He whispered, almost to himself, You ain't worth this. The next morning, Luke buried the 2 men side by side under the mesquite trees. He wasn't the kind of man to leave bodies for the vultures. When he was done, he found a scrap of paper in one of their coats, a letter sealed with a wax stamp. The letter was addressed to someone in Tucson, signed by Colonel James Weller, Department of Engineering and Telegraphs. It read, The device recovered from the Prescott site must be secured immediately. It contains components not of our manufacture. Handle with utmost secrecy. Return to Washington upon retrieval. Luke read it twice, his jaw tightening. So the government had been looking for this thing all along. Maybe they'd lost it years ago, maybe longer. He folded the letter and tucked it into his pocket. He didn't care much for Washington, but he understood one thing. If he rode into Tucson, he wouldn't come back. That night, he sat by the fire again, holding the device in his hands. The faint apple-shaped light flickered once more. This time a tiny sound followed, a soft click like something mechanical waking up. Then silence. Luke stared at it for a long time. Whatever this thing was, it didn't belong in his world. But it was here now, and men had died for it. He thought of Dunn, of the burned ranch, of the endless dust that swallowed everything out here. Then he made his decision. At dawn, Luke rode toward Devil's Canyon, a place no one in their right mind went alone. The cliffs there were sharp as knives, and the wind screamed through them like the voices of the dead. But Luke knew what he was doing. He'd been a scout once. He knew how to make something disappear for good. He reached the canyon edge and climbed down into a narrow ravine where the sunlight barely reached. The rock walls shimmered with old mineral veins, glittering faintly. He stopped near a flat stone and knelt. He took out the iPhone, stared at it one last time. For a moment he thought he saw his own reflection staring back. Older, tired, but alive. The screen flickered faintly, showing a ghostly image. A man's face he didn't recognize, with eyes full of sorrow. Then it went dark again. Luke exhaled slowly. "You're just light and glass. But you sure brought a lot of darkness." He placed it in the dirt, covered it with stones, and whispered a prayer, not for himself, but for the land. When he climbed out of the canyon, the sun was just rising, painting the cliffs gold. He turned once more to look back. There was nothing left to see. Weeks passed. Luke rebuilt the cabin, fixed the fences, and buried his regrets alongside the past. The law never came for him. Maybe Dunn's death was pinned on the outlaws. Maybe folks just stopped asking questions. Out here, stories had a way of blowing away with the wind. He kept the sheriff's badge on the mantel, next to a silver coin and a rusted spur. Some nights he'd sit by the fire, drink a little whiskey, and stare into the flames. He never spoke of the thing he'd found. Not to anyone. Years later, when a new railroad line cut through the valley, workers would dig near Devil's Canyon and find nothing but stones and dust. Whatever secrets the land had held, it kept them. Luke Carver lived out his days quietly, a man marked not by fame or fortune, but by a secret only he understood, that sometimes the past holds pieces of a future not yet written. He died with a shovel by his side, hands calloused and eyes still sharp, the desert wind whispering through the open door. And somewhere deep beneath the canyon floor, in the dark silence of the earth, a small black rectangle lay buried once more, waiting for the world to catch up. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more unforgettable tales from me. And make sure to tap the bell icon so you never miss a new episode. Thanks for watching.